Sure, growth is important, but now boards and investors are expecting companies to be much more efficient with the capital that they're given. It's about sitting down with business leaders and saying, okay, what are your objectives? If a headcount was a last resort, how would you solve this problem? If you couldn't just have an FTE tomorrow, what else could you do? So when you think about the best recruiters you know, are they great recruiters or are they great experts in this little piece? I now don't look and really trust much that comes into my inbox. I look now towards the relationships I have, people that I know and trust in the community. Ultimately, taking a job is one of the biggest purchases that you'll make in your life.
Hello, Paddy. How's it going? Welcome to Hiring on All Cylinders.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
So we've been speaking a lot, and I think a lot of leaders that we're speaking to are thinking about the same thing. And talent has gone on this real journey over the last decade of moving from this kind of tactical, delivery-focused organization to have a seat at the table and be more strategic. And we've been on this crazy bull market for the last decade, and now we've faced this real turbulent time of COVID and now the boom and now whatever's happening right now, which has caught quite a lot of people off guard, I feel, and made people rethink the role of being a talent leader and what that actually means. And so I thought we could spend some time today talking about that and how we can adapt and what the new role of talent leader is. So I wanted to get your point of view because you're in a really interesting position right now of what you think has changed when it comes to this kind of TA leader position, responsibilities, and how you're thinking about it right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think that when you take a step back and you think, how has talent changed? I think actually we might be going back to a more normal time. You think about the macro, you go back to 2008 and the sort of the zero interest environment that's followed since then. This has been quite a strange market phenomenon. In the last kind of 150 years, there hasn't been a time where capital has been so abundant, where growth has been really the only thing that mattered for many companies. This manifested itself in the blitz scaling generation. Companies doubling, tripling or more in a given year. And the role of talent became, how do I hire more faster? And so therefore the focus, the aperture for talent leaders was really just delivery. It really was bums on seats. How do we fill these roles as quickly as possible? And I was there, I was part of that. When I worked in the teams at Improbable, we literally took our hiring numbers. We worked out exactly how many outreach we had to send, how many interviews we had to do, how many interview rooms we would need. And that's how we planned and forecasted our recruitment. At no point, were we sitting there going, what is this the right thing to do? Are these the right hires to make? It was, the business wants this, so let's go out and deliver it. I think fast forward to now, that's changed. Capital is no longer as easily available as it once was. And now other metrics in businesses are much more important. We're looking now back to profitability, things like your EBITDA, like all of these business measures that talk about the overall sustainability and health of an organization beyond just growth. Sure, growth is important, but now boards and investors are expecting companies to be much more efficient with the capital that they're given. They're expected to show much more traction. And really we're going back to how business has been for a long time. And I think for a lot of talent leaders, it's new and it's different to them because they weren't here the last time that happened.
Yeah, it is a real shift because I think a lot of the people who are leading talent functions now were maybe either started after the last recession or were very early in their careers where they weren't leading anything, weren't really responsible for much.
Yeah.
So how do you think this new market dynamic and this new reality changes the role? And how will that look going forward? Like, what's important for a talent leader to be doing right now and to be thinking about?
Yeah, I think what's important for a talent leader now, particularly, I work with a lot of companies kind of in Series A, Series B, this kind of relatively early stage of growth. What talent leaders in those businesses should be thinking about and what they should be doing is working as a partner and as a thought partner to those leaders. It isn't about, going and collecting every manager's shopping list. It's about sitting down with business leaders and saying, okay, what are your objectives? What are the capabilities that you need to have in order to achieve those? And what does your human capital plan look like? And this really crosses that bridge into many people topics. And I think that, I think as talent and people, we've done ourselves a disservice by bifurcating those two disciplines in such a hard way. Actually, the insights, the knowledge, and the things to do are often defined and born on the people side and then delivered on the talent side. And really, as a leader in a talent team or a people team in an early stage business, you need to understand both sides of that. Because if you don't, you're just not going to really have the full picture. So I'd encourage any leaders in talent, if you have a peer in the people side, you should be working very closely with them. They should be, you and them should be very, very aligned on what is important, what does good look like, what is possible, what does the business need, and what do you have today. And I think as working into the business itself, being that thought partner, being that sparring partner as well. I think often managers, particularly managers who, like the talent leaders, have grown up in the 0% interest rate, have grown up in a time of growth and abundance. They default to it's a hire. They default to I have a problem, therefore I need to make a hire. And I think that it's our role to challenge that and to sort of say, okay, if a headcount was a last resort, how would you solve this problem? If you couldn't just have an FTE tomorrow, what else could you do? Is it a tool? Is it a piece of tech? Is it a contractor? Is it a project? Is this something that you need now and in 12 months and in 24 months? And I find that nearly every hiring manager will struggle to answer that question. What is this role in a year from now? Is this just capacity? Is this capability? And I think being able to have those conversations in an intelligent way with stakeholders is the first step on really being that thought partner and that sparring partner to them.
Do you feel like typically talent leaders have been given that permission internally to go and have those conversations? Because I kind of think that you and me have probably been in the same situation before, and a bunch of other talent leaders, where we maybe try and push back and the answer is just do what I say, basically from a CTO or from someone else, right? And TA historically has been seen as this kind of supporting function of like you said, we need some hires, get the hires in as quickly as possible. What's the process you think of if a talent leader is feeling like that, like, they want to have these conversations, they want to challenge, and they're just not getting the respect or the response that they would like? What's the route there? Does it have to come from the top down? How do you approach that situation?
It's a tough one, right? I mean, look, ultimately, if you're going to be successful in an organization, that organization has to have the right kind of behaviors where leaders can be collegiate and work together. You wouldn't, the head of customer success would not accept being told to just get on with it by the head of product, right? And I think if you're going to play a leadership role in a business, you need to be afforded the space to do that. And I think that's got to be part of, when you take a role, having a really clear conversation. What is it that you're bringing me in to do here? Do you actually want a leader in this, or are you looking for, just a pure delivery function? I think that's first setting that expectation. I think when I hear that from people, my stakeholders don't take me seriously, that I can't push back. There's normally a couple of things that sit beneath that. Either you're not credible, or there's an assumption that you're not doing the work, right? So let's assume that you're credible. Let's assume you're good at what you do. It's probably a communication gap, right? You're not communicating to that leader effectively what is happening, what has been done. Because assuming that they're a rational actor and they want the same good things that you want and the same great success for the business, they're going to listen. I've had difficult stakeholders in the past, stakeholders where the assumption on their part has been, you're just saying the role's too hard. I know these people are out there, why can't you just go and get them? Right? I'm sure you've been there too, right? And actually, if you're in that situation, I think about every role that I've ever worked that's been really hard to hire. I don't just mean, it's taken me time. I mean, like, it's been a real struggle. Really, there was a problem. And that problem existed further up the stack of the business than I could solve as a recruiter or whatever it may be. Either it wasn't defined well, either the role wasn't scoped, or the problem wasn't actually what we thought it was, or we were trying to combine too many things together. The only way to influence those kinds of challenges is to go back to a stakeholder with data, with insights, showing the work to say, look, this is what has happened. This is what has been done. This is the data from the market. These are the challenges we face. You have two options. We can continue to fail and continue the same actions with similar results and hope that we get lucky, or we can make changes. And I think if you're able to do that in a reasoned, sensible way, every stakeholder is going to listen to that. They're going to take they're going to take the work on board, and they're going to adapt how they approach it. And that's the first step in being a credible partner. It's, do I believe this person's doing a good job? Do I believe what they say? Can they show in the evidence to me that they're doing the work in the right way? I think that's the first step. And you'll be amazed how quickly a challenging stakeholder can turn into your best stakeholder when you begin to work in that way.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And you were talking earlier about becoming that true partner to the business and being able to challenge and really have a thoughtful conversation around hiring rather than just let's get some bums on seats here. To be able to have that, you have to have access to knowledge on how that function works. So I guess in practical terms, could you maybe talk through, let's say I'm a TA leader and we're going through this big hiring spurt on go-to-market hiring. As a leader, how would you run that process? Would it be kind of quarterly meetings with HR or people to understand kind of headcount requirements, kind of internal mobility, whatever it might be? Is there a process that you would put in place to make sure that you have got those key touch points with partners across the business, that you are being strategic?
Yeah, I mean, look, every project's different and every team is different, so it's hard to generalize. But I think in a clear way, I think when you start a big piece of work like that, bring the key stakeholders together, anyone that's going to be working on that project, set out what is the goal, what are the expectations on both sides, what are the assumptions that we're going into with this. I think this is something really key that people don't necessarily think about. When you go into a piece of work like that, both sides of the table have beliefs and thoughts about how this is going to work, who's going to do what's going to be true about the work that happens. And I think I'm just documenting that, getting them down on paper can be really helpful. One of the things that often business leaders don't think about when they tell you, hey, we need to hire 15 people here or a huge increase in team there or whatever, they don't realize that for 3 to 4 months or however long your hiring may take, that's going to have a massive impact on the team itself. The requirements for interviewing, the requirements on their diaries. So I think being able to go in with a very clear plan, a very clear idea of what will be necessary to achieve this, data from previous hiring where possible, and be able to say, look, for us to achieve these goals, these things need to be true. We need to start working out who is going to do what. We're going to need to pre-book interview blocks. We're going to need to make sure that you've got enough capacity in your diary, your team's diary. We've got to make sure that we can actually deliver what we're saying in a reasonable time frame, that we're using data to support that and not just making up a timescale. And then having the right people talk regularly enough in order to be able to deliver that work. Now, that's all very tactical. I think as a leader, I think actually just as a recruiter, if you're about to embark on a big piece of work with a department, even if it's an area you think you know well, it's your job to become an expert in that to some degree, right? And I would just go and live in my hiring manager's pocket. I would go and join their stand-ups. So I would sit by them if I'm physically in the office, or if I can't, I'd make sure I'm talking to them regularly. I'd understand the language they're using. I'd shadow some of their interviews. I'd go and interview the last 2 people on their team, the best 2 performers on that team. I'd really immerse myself in understanding that. Going beyond that, go and find out what books they read. What kind of information are they absorbing, and really immerse yourself in the knowledge of that space. Because ultimately, when you come to speak to a candidate, they're judging you as well, right? And there's nothing worse than speaking to somebody, particularly, as a candidate, you speak to a recruiter who just doesn't understand what they're talking about. They don't know what kind of products we're using in this team. What are the methodologies we use? Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. Oh, what are the targets? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's the first thing that, you need to better cover off with a candidate, is be really credible in that area. I think as you become more senior, at least in my view, there is an expectation that your job is not just as a functional leader. It is a leader of the business. And if you're going to be a leader in a business, it is your job, first and foremost, to understand how that business operates. What are the key drivers for success? What are the key objectives? What is your market? What is the pain point of your customers? Ultimately, if you operate as a functional specialist on delivery, and that is all you do, that is all you will be. It's your job to try and elevate your understanding of the organization and be able to contribute more to that conversation.
Absolutely. Really interesting as you were saying that. It reminded me of a conversation I recently had with Carla, who's the VP of talent from Reddit, where she has this real emphasis on adaptability and hiring people with a real propensity to have high levels of adaptability. Based on what you just said, do you think it's necessary for teams to be specialists, to hire sales recruiters or technical recruiters or whatever else? Or this is going a bit off tangent here, but it just made me think, or do you think it's about having this clear process that you mentioned? If you're going to run a sales project, you immerse yourself. If you're running a tech project, again, you immerse yourself in that. What's your opinion there?
It's really funny. When I first started my career, I'm a tech recruiter, and tech recruitment is the hardest recruitment, and therefore, that means we're the best. And I was really naive. And I think the more commercial recruiting I've done, the more I've realised that tech hiring is easy. Like tech hiring as comparing to hiring AEs or kind of these kind of roles. My God, it's easy. And so the thing I would say to you is, when you think about the best recruiters are they great recruiters or are they great experts in this little piece? When I think about the great recruiters that I've met and worked with, they have amazing fundamentals and they have the ability to learn and pick things up. And actually, their real skill in that is being able to understand the business that they're working in and being able to adapt their skills to it. So I can totally see that. Now, if I'm building a talent function and I've got a bunch of tech hiring, I've got a bunch of commercial hiring, I'm gonna separate it, because the headspace of one person to move between different skill sets and different roles in a given day, it diminishes returns, right? It's not as scalable as splitting it up. But I think to be a truly great recruiter is to understand how recruitment works and how businesses operate and how to match people to the right opportunities.
Totally. I've had exactly the same beliefs, that it's about the person and their skill set rather than, what they specialize in. I totally agree. And I've seen that come to life so many times. It's just a really interesting concept, because I actually think maybe it's the distinction between contingent agency recruitment and in-house. It's a slight difference, because I think agency maybe does make sense to have a specialism, because you know your pool of candidates, you can build your market, but again, when you move in-house, you're working for one company at a time. You really build a deep knowledge of how to be successful in that business using your skills as a recruiter. And I think it's all about the person.
But just on that, right? So as an agency recruiter, you might pull 10, 15 jobs a month. How many of them are you going to fill? You're going to fill 3, 2, 4, right? You're not going to fill all of them. If you go and work internally and you've got 10 jobs to fill, you can't turn around and be like, oh, I'm only going to fill 3 of these, right? So it's all well and good being an expert in JavaScript, but you are going to have to fill that CS role. You are going to have to find that financial director. So if you can't be adaptable in that, you are less useful to that business. Now, that might be a function of stage, right? That might be more of an early company problem than a late company problem, because as I say, as it scales, you do see greater specialization. But particularly at that early stage, adaptability is basically all you have, because whatever it will become obsolete eventually.
Yeah, one of my first managers in-house said that agency, you're placing candidates, in-house, you're filling roles. And it's a small distinction, but it really does make a difference, because you've got no choice. You're there, sat across from the manager, and he doesn't care, or she doesn't care if you know about JavaScript or all the different frameworks. They just want the role filled. And so you've got to problem solve and get to a point where you create great partnership and you get it done.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a system for learning, right? It's about having a playbook that you can turn up to any discipline, and that okay, what are the questions that I need to know? What are really great candidates going to ask me? And they're typically going to ask you the same things. They're going to say, what are the challenges? What's not working today? What are the opportunities? If I come to do this role, what can I hope to achieve in the next few years, right? The best candidates always want to know not just what they're going to do today, but what they can do tomorrow. You need to start with that information. And it doesn't matter what the role is. You can go and ask those questions, right? From there, it's about, understanding the team and being able to position that effectively to candidates. So yeah, it's about having that ability to go and learn something that you don't know. And that in of itself is a skill set that will serve you incredibly well through your career, whether it's in recruitment or anything else.
This is on the same topic, kind of building out teams and how to think about that, because we talked about how the market shifted from this zero interest rate phenomenon, and now we're maybe in a more stable kind of turning into growth, but more sustainable growth market. Let's say I'm a talent leader and I've been wrapped up in this kind of hyper growth phase, and I have been more reactive maybe than I should have been. I was being led by, these big hiring numbers. I was built a massive permanent, recruitment team, and I've had to just lay everyone off and gone through this kind of real chaotic, volatile time. And now I'm thinking to myself, okay, now is the time to regroup. It's a time for me to put in place the framework, which I think a lot of people are in this position, to really put in place something really solid to build upon once the market starts picking up some pace. How should leaders be thinking about building their team up from this point? Because I do think there's quite a lot of hesitance in the market. People don't want to be burnt again. They don't want to build these big perm teams. They want to be more creative. How are you thinking about it, and how would you encourage other leaders to think about it?
Yeah, and I've said this before as well, actually. But I remember being back in startups. I had a team of 13, 14, 15 FTEs in a company of less than 500. I can't imagine large standing teams in recruiting functions in companies of that size happening again in the short term. As you say, people don't want to go through that whole whipsaw of overhiring and having to lay people off and vice versa, and back and forth. I can imagine a future where you have a core team, and I think you're going to see less specialization. So you're going to see roles, unfortunately, roles like campus specialist, roles like D&I focused recruiters, roles like employer branding. You're going to see less of those in recruiting teams, and I think that's a loss, by the way. You're going to see less of those. And you're going to see a smaller team, and you're going to see different options, whether it's contract recruiters, whether it's, on-demand solutions, whether it's embedded solutions. You're going to see them augment the footprint of the talent team with alternative services to maintain a smaller core that you can then scale up and scale down. I think this will put more strain, actually, ironically, on those smaller teams. So you're seeing teams now where they've let, a huge percentage of the team go, and that team that remains is now underwater because now they've got, a large number of recs relative to the number of employees. They've now got to pick up the branding. They've now got to work on how we activate the D&I strategy. They've also got to now think about campus programs, all while the time keeping the lights on for the rest of the pipeline. And so I think there's a good opportunity there to look at kind of other solutions to augment that delivery.
And do you think automation, Joe, there's a lot of talk at the moment about AI. You're probably, obviously, your portfolio companies you're working with probably is thinking about that a lot. Do you think that that's going to make any meaningful dent in the work that recruiters do in the short to medium term? Like, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, you see all the kind of hype, right? AI is going to revolutionize recruiting and all the rest of it. I actually think, it's actually going to have the opposite effect. I think that you're going to see even more focus on a hyper-human experience. When you open your email inbox today, how many emails came from a person? Like, how many do you know they came from a person? I must receive, God knows how many emails a day. Half of those are automated scripts. I now don't look and really trust much that comes into my inbox. I look now towards the relationships I have in my network to people that I know and trust in the community, organizations that I've built a personal connection or relationship with. That's where I'm going to trust information from. I think we're about to see like an explosion in the amount of content, the amount of emails, the amount of articles, to the point where it's going to overload. And we're actually going to revert back to who do we know, who do we trust, who have we met, who have we had conversations with, where we actually, those relationship matters. Ultimately, taking a job is one of the biggest purchases that you'll make in your life. It's your time. You can never replace that. It's up there with like buying your first house, it's up with like something like that. Is you're going to spend, a significant proportion of your waking hours in this environment. And actually, I think that the human connection in that is vital. You wouldn't just take a job based on an email that you got. You're going to want to go meet the team. You're going to want to go and do that. I think there's going to be a great focus on that. So I think that the recruiters that work out, how do we create better personal connections with our target candidates? They're going to fare better than those who decide, how can I automate 40,000 emails a week? to just sort of, deluge the market. You're going to see a complete decline in outreach open rates and response rates. It's just kind of, you see just this huge explosion of these kinds of tools and techniques being used.
Yeah. I've been thinking for a while now with the kind of this oversubscribed approach, this overwhelming approach of social media and technology, that there's going to be this rebellion against it almost. But then I just think to myself, am I just getting old and cranky? And am I just going to get swept away with the times? But I do think you're absolutely right. We see it on the sales front massively. All these jokes, I feel like sales is a little bit ahead of recruiting in terms of the way it uses, relationship management, CRMs, sourcing, outreach. And you're seeing it, as you said, you open up your email, you have tons of spam, really, unpersonalized messaging. You can't distinguish between, anyone really. And what you end up defaulting to, like you said, is people that you've actually met, that that you like, that you have some kind of relationship with. And I think that doubling down on that right now, especially with this big wave of remote working where everyone feels like they can just do everything virtually, I feel like you have a massive upper hand at actually having met someone,
Yeah. Well, I think it's maybe I'm getting old as well. Like, I think there is something about meeting people. I do think that you just think about how many new companies are there every year. How many new exciting opportunities are there every day. You're competing with so much, and you just even if what you're doing is great, even if it's hyper personalized, even if you get it to the right person, the chances are they're not going to read it. Right? Just statistically, like, you're one of 1,000 voices. And so companies that work out, how do they become that lighthouse? How do they become that point of attraction for the right people? And it's almost like akin to trying to build a consumer brand. How can you reach out to more people in a one-to-many method that brings those people to you? Because I promise you, you're much more likely to hire someone who's already, over their own volition, subscribed to your careers newsletter or follows your company page on LinkedIn. Those people are interested. They're warm leads. You're right to say that sales and marketing are ahead of recruitment. I always think it's like 10, 15 years. You go and see what kind of sales and marketing have been doing for a decade. Recruiters are just about, I think they were just around got our heads around over the last couple of years of the idea of like email sequences. This has been going on in sales for God knows how long. I remember having to hack together different sales tools to run email sequencing campaigns in 2016, 17, 18 when I was back at Improbable, because they just didn't exist in the recruitment world. So you're right to say that they're there. I think the challenge is now what's coming down the pipe for recruitment is already manifesting in sales. Across the board, sales teams are missing quota, right? Across the world, you're seeing this now. You're seeing that outbound as a channel is becoming less effective across entire swathes of the SaaS industry. So how do we observe that, and how do we adapt before it just follows down the pipe as these things tend to do?
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting experiment over the next kind of couple of years to see, can they actually find a way where technology can be, where does it fit in the workflow of a recruiter's day? And I'm sure there's lots of benefits that it can bring, but I just don't think it's the ones that people are thinking about at the moment.
Sure, the one that makes me laugh is when you see kind of these threads on LinkedIn, places where people are like, "Oh, I've been screened out by the AI in the ATS."
Yeah,
it's like my goodness, like, please tell me where I can find such an ATS.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've ever seen one that can successfully read a CD, let alone make a decision on its own about them, right? And I think that there are opportunities for technology to increase that. I think things like scheduling, things like the admin side of it, I think the matching, the identification of talent, I just don't think it's there. I don't think that can happen, because I think there's so many variables on the company side, there's so many variables on the individual side. There's always going to be a human in the loop, and arguably you want that human in the loop, because you want to be able to look somebody in the eye, whether it's in person or over a call like this, and say, hey, listen, what's it like to work there? Because if I'm going to commit to you 40, 50 hours a week plus in my life, I want to know that it's going to be worth it. And I'm not going to trust a robot to tell me that.
Yeah, totally. Well, fingers crossed we don't. I feel like that would be a sad existence. But Before we go, Paddy, I wanted to ask you one final question, and we might have touched upon it slightly, but what are you most excited about when it comes to the future of talent?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think the thing that I want to see, and I don't know the answers, but the thing I want to see is how we can leverage the idea of community better in hiring. How can we build communities around the organizations that we're building, around the problems that we're solving? And how can we use that to identify the best talent, talent that wants to work on the problems that we're tackling? The best people in the world can go anywhere. So how do we build communities of that talent that are interested in doing what we can do? I think that's a really exciting space. I think there's a long way to go in working it out, but that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like audience building in general seems to be the meta at the moment. Like if you can build a great engaged audience, it's so applicable across the board. Well, Paddy, really great talking to you. I could have gone on for another hour. But just to wrap up, where can people find you? Where can they get in touch with you or your company?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not too active on socials or anything like that, but I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Paddy Lambros.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on Hiring All Cylinders, and see you soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care.